It's another Football Friday from the Oklahoma Newsroom. I'm joined by our college football team. I'm Jenny Carlson. I guess I should introduce myself first, guys, but joined by columnist Barry Trammell, OSU beat writer Kyle Fredrickson, and remotely by OU beat writer Brooke Pryor. Let's start with the Sooners. They head to TCU for a 4 p.m. kick, which, by the way, is still a little bit weird in my head. I don't know how it sounds to everybody else, but the big issue to start off with is the cornerback position. And Brooke, let's start with you on this one. Is there a solution at quarterback for Oklahoma that you foresee us seeing potentially on Saturday afternoon?
The funny thing is, at first when you were talking, I thought that you said quarterback, and I realized no, they have that one taken care of. At quarterback, I think the obvious thing to do is to continue to go with Parrish Cobb. He's a young guy that they can really bring along. But if he continues to struggle the way he did against Ohio State, they took him out and he had 2 touchdowns scored on him in the exact same spot each time. And then they tried to go with Mekhi Quick. He can't do much. They tried to go flip the field, put Jordan Thomas over there. You still have to have another cornerback. I think that they could potentially move a safety over. Steven Parker is a talented guy. We don't know how versatile he is, but, you don't know until you try, right? And then you could also bring up guys like Jordan Parker, who's a young freshman, but he was the highest-rated defensive back in the recruiting class. So I think that's a possibility, too.
Well, Barry, is there an obvious answer existing on this team, or is it just a problem that's going to persist? Is Steven Parker the answer?
Well, I assume not. I assume they've exhausted all the potential candidates. They're around these guys every day. Bob Stoops actually said something really interesting after practice on Wednesday. He wasn't really talking about all passing in general, but he was talking about the back shoulder throws that have really hurt Oklahoma. He said, we just need to get some ourselves. And what he's really meaning is, hey, we might have to outscore people. Right. Instead of getting, 25 offensive points against Houston, maybe the Sooners get 35, they win that game.
Right.
This is a team effort that's put Oklahoma in a 1-2 hole. The cornerback is a problem. It's going to be maybe Quick gets better, maybe Cobb develops. Personally, I'd give Dakota Austin another chance. It seemed like he got pulled awfully quick, one bad game, and he's out. He's had good games before.
Absolutely.
So I don't know that it's a lost cause, but I think the best solution is to score more touchdowns yourself.
Well, Brooke, it looks, if you look at the roster, the Sooners aren't lacking numbers at the cornerback position. They actually have a decent amount of bodies to throw at that position, but as Barry mentioned, guys like Dakota Austin, PJ Mbanasor played a little bit at one point last year. We haven't really heard from him. Stan Von Taylor. They seem to have gotten guys in recruiting that you would think could potentially develop. Is this a development issue? Barry mentions the back shoulder throws also. That's become a real issue. I know there's some give and take in what you give up if you really defend those differently, but is this a development question that the Sooners are dealing with right now?
It certainly seems that's the issue because it's, like you said, it's not recruiting. They've got guys on the roster. They should be stocked at those positions. And Mike Stoops even said earlier this week that they needed to do a better job of developing those guys. Some of them have off-the-field issues. Some of them, it just seems like they've got a really short leash on about 3 of those guys. You mentioned Stan Von Taylor, PJ Mbanasor, Dakota Austin. And I would love to know the reasoning for why that leash is so short, because clearly they showed something in high school that made OU recruit them. Some of them had really good freshman seasons. Some of them, like Dakota Austin last year, came in for Zach Sanchez and played really well. So what is going on in practice that these coaches are saying, oh, no, there's no way we can throw these guys out there, while the 3 that they do trust are getting torched every time a back shoulder throw comes into the end zone?
Yeah, definitely a concern, I know, for the Sooners, but also for fans. Let's switch to Oklahoma State for just a second because, defensive secondary was an issue last week at Baylor, Kyle, and these big chunk plays. You had the chunk plays the defense was giving up, and then you had the fumbles with the offense, but especially the ball security and the chunk plays, is that fixable with the guys they have, or does Texas? Are they gonna look at those and say we can really take advantage there?
Well, I think those are the looming questions on this roster right now after that Baylor game. Mike Gundy said, that was probably his easiest post-game press conference ever. It was turnovers and allowing those big plays, and that's clearly some of the biggest issues this team is having right now. 65% of Baylor yards in that game came on just 9 plays. The Cowboys rank, I think, 101st in total takeaways allowed this year. Right now they've got 8. So, those are 2 areas of concern for a team that otherwise has certainly performed pretty well with an improving run game. Mason Rudolph, his decision-making has been a little bit better in these past few games. He showed off sort of an NFL arm on some of those deep outs. But, I think in the coaching staff minds, these are some coachable things. These are, this is Justice Hill, a true freshman playing in his first, few real college games, getting tackled by real college defenders. You're going to start to learn just how hard those guys bat the ball. In terms of the big plays, I think on the defensive side, that's where there might be a little more concern, because if there's certainly a talent gap against some of these Big 12 offenses, it's going to be tough to overcome, because if your technique isn't sound and you're not putting into place what Glenn Spencer's trying to teach, there's not really a whole else much they can do.
Yeah, Barry, what about it? I mean, are you concerned more about the big plays or the fumbles at this point?
The big plays. You can take care of the fumbles. Fumbling's an easy problem to fix. You just put somebody else in there and the problem is fixed and everybody gets the message. And Justice Hill, I think he'll be all right. I think he'll run hard. I think he'll run well. I think he'll protect the ball from now on. If he doesn't, somebody else is going to be the tailback. But the big plays on defense, that's a problem. The truth of the matter is, everybody gets worked up about all these cornerback issues and these big plays. It's just hard to do in college football. It's hard to defend. The way the rules are written, the way that the game is officiated, the way that the game has developed with the spreads and the hurry-ups, you're going to give up plays and you're going to get burned. And you're not going to play a lot of 17-10 games. Everybody talks about Big 12 style of play, but we see it in the SEC. The national title game was 45-40, folks. And Mike Stoops and Glenn Spencer were not in the building. So that's just the way it goes. You put the best guys out there, playing DB at Oklahoma State, and you just take your chances.
Yeah, well, and Kyle, to sort of play it forward to this Texas opponent, 11 o'clock start on Saturday, by the way, up in Stillwater. Texas has had its own struggles defending big plays. They've given up a lot of those too, but they can also produce them. How much of an issue does that become on Saturday?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because this is sort of the baby Baylor offense. Same type of schemes, but I don't think the same type of athletes. Aside from just a bruising rushing attack, they got 2 tailbacks who are more than 240 pounds, and that's really, I think, the identity of this offense. But they have that big play potential, Jenny. You mentioned it. Shane Buechele is a guy who does not look like a freshman. Mike Gundy joked that Buechele throws the football like a baseball, but he throws it pretty good for throwing it like a baseball. Setting some freshman records, at least 200 passing yards in his first couple starts. So in a lot of ways, this OSU team mirrors this Texas team with some of the issues they've been having, especially giving up a lot of the big plays. Texas and Cal getting into a shootout before the bye week. So, but that's the thing. Like I mentioned, Texas had the week off. There's a lot of heat on Vance Bedford, I think, right now to improve this defense that him and Charlie Strong have been running together for years and years, going back to their Louisville days. So, it's going to be interesting to see how these things clash. But with guys like Ashton Lampkin and Ramon Richards, guys who have playing experience but not necessarily leadership experience, you wonder how it's going to play out.
Yeah, well, you mentioned those Texas quarterbacks, and obviously the Sooners are going to get their own challenge from opposing quarterback, and TCU's Kenny Hill. And Brooke, will come to you for this. He's had some interception issues. Sooners haven't gotten interceptions, though. Could this potentially be a week where that Sooner secondary, maybe they're still struggling to cover, but maybe they start to get some picks and turn things around in that regard?
Yeah, it certainly seems like this is the week to get that ball rolling in the secondary. Obviously they have had their struggles. That's been more than well documented. But Kenny Hill has thrown 4 interceptions through 4 games. I think it was his first game of the season. He threw 2, or it was early in the season, one of the first 2 games. And not only that, but his receivers have a big issue with drops. I think they've had at least 16 through 4 games.
Wow.
So this is an area where the secondary can really pressure, get an interception, and get the ball rolling and get the confidence that they say that they really, really need to carry through for the rest of the season.
Well, and Kenny Hill's a guy that a lot of people remember from his Texas A&M time. Barry, you're writing about this for Saturday, the transfer quarterbacks. I mean, we've got Kenny Hill in the TCU purple after being at A&M. We've got Baker Mayfield in the Sooner crimson after being at Texas Tech. It seems like everywhere you turn, you've got quarterbacks that are transferring. What's going on here?
Well, I mean, they've made it easier to transfer. Doesn't affect these guys, but the graduate transfer rules lets people transfer immediately. If you've graduated, got a degree, you can transfer immediately and be eligible. So we've seen more of that. We're also seeing just a general in society, what I think is general unsettledness with, see it on the high school level, you see it in college, guys just, things not working out, instead of fighting through it, you go somewhere else.
Right.
And, Gary Patterson said, people who are starting generally don't leave. And Baker Mayfield had lost the job in Lubbock to Davis Webb in College Station. Kenny Hill had lost the job to Kyle Allen. And so it was a case of these guys thinking, I don't really want to sit on the bench. I want to play. So away they go, and they both found places where they can play and prosper. Mayfield's already been an All-American in Norman. We'll see what Kenny Hill does in a full season with Fort Worth. But it's just a case of, to me it's cultural, just people moving around a lot more. We're a lot more mobile society, and that goes for quarterbacks too.
Is this any... some people would say that they need to loosen the transfer rules across the board in college football. You've got coaches that can change, every season if they want to. Why can't the players? But is this situation, problematic at all for college football, or is it a good thing? And maybe it leads to maybe a softening of some of the transfer rules.
I personally like it.
Yeah.
I would. I personally think it's immoral that players have to sit out if they transfer, while coaches, as you mentioned, just hell-mel, just go wherever they want to. So, it would be chaotic, but, the players didn't create the chaos. So, I think, and the other thing we have is, if you look at the professional level, every advent and advancement for free agency has been declared gloom and doom for the sport, and the sport has only blossomed and bloomed. So, free agency and the ability to move around has not really affected sports. I personally think it's an abomination on the high school level, but I don't know that it would be catastrophic on the college level.
Yeah, definitely interesting. I know you've dove into the issue, got a list of a lot of these guys, and you forget just how much these guys are moving around for sure. When we talk about quarterbacks and this game against TCU, obviously the Baker Mayfield, Gary Patterson riff comes up a little bit in my mind, but another riff that I think we got to talk about, Kyle.
Yeah. That was a good transition, by the way.
Thanks you. It's this Boone Pickens, Mike Gundy thing, and I'm not sure that anything changed markedly this week in their relationship, but obviously Boone Pickens talking, very publicly about, I don't talk to Mike, we don't talk, I don't know if there's a riff. I mean, how did we get here? And are we somewhere different than we were a month ago, 3 months ago, a year ago?
Well, it sort of depends the value you put on these guys' words. Because back in January, we sat down with Mike Gundy after the Sugar Bowl, kind of had a full season discussion. What went wrong this year? What could have gone better? What went well? And I asked him about the Gundy-Pickens relationship, and at that time he said, yeah, he knows that it's tough during bowl season because we got practices and we're traveling, but those phone calls about once a week. He said, when I go into Dallas for recruiting trips, I try to stop by the office, get lunch. So it seemed like from Gundy's side there was some motivation. Now, whether or not it deteriorated to that point or not, if Gundy was just trying to put it on a save face, it's hard to say. But clearly, with what Pickens had told Kirk Bohls in the Austin American-Statesman, basically that Gundy has poor people skills and that they don't talk anymore. you know, regardless of the way you feel about Boone Pickens' influence on this program, his words have to carry weight because his name's on the stadium. There's really no way around it, and there's no way around it for Gundy and this team. You know, in the midst of this 2-2 start, going to have to start answering questions about the opinion of an 88-year-old man who lives in Dallas and runs an oil business. So
Right.
I can see in Mike Gundy's head why this whole thing might seem a little ridiculous, why he might be a little off-put by it. But when you're talking about two guys who are very wealthy and have very big egos and are very talented in their little worlds they live in, these kinds of things are bound to happen.
Is there an end game here, Barry? Does Boone Pickens have an end game in mind?
No, I don't think Boone thought past the end of the day. Here's the deal. I think they're playing poker, and I think Gundy's won. If Boone Pickens could fire Mike Gundy, I think it would have already happened.
Yeah.
Because of who is in the middle of them, Mike Holder, Gundy's boss, Boone's great friend. Holder has to play mediator. He's the one that has to keep these two guys, either try to get them together or keep them apart. And I think what we've seen is that, you know, Boone clearly does not like Mike Gundy. He does not care for Mike Gundy. In some ways, he doesn't even think Mike Gundy has done an adequate job, which most of us would say is a silly premise. So if he could get rid of Gundy, I think he would have already. I think Holder said, Boone, I love you, but we can't do that. We're not going to do that. So Boone just says whatever's on his mind. The whole notion is sort of ridiculous. Boone wants Mike Gundy to call him on a regular basis, and Gundy has the time to do it. He just chooses not to because he's hard-headed and he's either stubborn or principled or whatever the case may be. So it's just two big egos clashing. I think it's a bad look for OSU. I think it's unfortunate. Takes everybody's eye off the ball. They are playing Texas this week. Shouldn't be talking about the relationship between the benefactor and the head coach, but I don't know that it has any lasting repercussions.
Is it worrisome, Kyle? I mean, I don't think fans love the idea of this being the boilerplate topic this week, but is it problematic that these two are apparently, I don't know if at odds may be too strong, but it not having
May not be strong.
or
may not be strong enough.
Or maybe it's not. Yeah, exactly. Whatever they are, is that problematic?
Well, I think Mike Gundy sort of foreshadowed this a little bit when talking about Les Miles, interestingly enough. Barry asked Mike Gundy on the conference call, Mike, what's your reaction to Les being let go? And Mike immediately went to a story from Mike Leach saying, if you coach one place long enough, they're going to find a reason to get rid of you. Well, Mike Gundy is going into his 12th year at OSU, and it seems like in some cases there might be some boosters or administrators or someone in the hierarchy of kind of their power structure who doesn't like the fact that this is an OSU team that's beat OU twice, that they've only won one big title. I think expectations were just through the roof because of the facilities. You could make the argument this is a program that's maybe plateaued in some ways over the past few seasons just because, the championships haven't been there. But if this is something where, like Barry said, Mike Holder can broker this relationship, the give and take. Let's make this work because, we are still, being successful as an athletic department. We need both of you guys. I think that this won't be a problem. But if Boone's opinion carries more weight than we know, then who knows? Maybe, Gundy is in a similar situation to Les Miles, if not this season, in the next few.
Yeah, it was interesting to revisit some of the things that were said when they glad-handed and said nice things about each other a couple of springs ago. Mike Gundy saying something along the lines of, OSU people deserve for us to be, cordial with each other, to be on good terms, or something to that effect. And yet here we are, 18 months-ish later, and, I don't think much has been repaired, if not, maybe even worse than it was at the time that they had their come together.
And let me say one thing.
Yeah.
I blame Boone for this because to whatever degree they're at odds, Gundy's kept it quiet. Gundy hadn't said anything about it. For all, if Boone hadn't said anything, we would think everything was great.
Right.
Gundy still hadn't said anything. He's tried to keep it down low. Boone's the one that's put it in the marketplace.
Yeah.
If they want to feud, if they want to fuss, fine. But if you keep it sort of secret, everybody's better off.
And let's remember, Boone has turned 88 in May, okay? This is a very bright, smart guy who's made a lot of money in his career, but anytime you reach that age, you just wonder kind of, what his mental health is, what the things that are priorities to him in his life. Sort of skews your perception. So whatever that's worth.
Yeah, and clearly he doesn't care what other people think about what he says.
Yes.
So he's willing to say it, but it is an interesting dynamic. I don't have any doubt that it will be a topic of conversation among a lot of Cowboy fans as they gather for this game on Saturday. Let me remind everybody you're watching Football Friday. We're talking all things Sooners and Cowboys, and let's transition back to the game down in Fort Worth for a second. Brooke, before the season started, you had said you looked at this game as a real turning point for the Sooners. You thought, potentially they get to this game, unscathed through their schedule to this point, almost, looking like a lock for the college football playoff. Now, obviously, that hasn't happened. It's a turning point for a whole different reason. How cataclysmic could things look if 1-3 is the record on Saturday night?
Yeah, I think that's something that the players are really aware of. Just talking with Dimitri Flowers last week, he said, there's a chance that we leave this weekend and we're, on the path to winning the Big 12. We're undefeated. That's great. That those goals, the Big 12 championship is still the number one goal of this team. That's what they want. But he also said there's a chance that they come out of this and they're 1-3, and it's one of the worst starts in the history of Oklahoma football. So the team is definitely aware that that's where the stakes sit right now. But as they're also saying, they don't want to think about that going into this game because that just adds more pressure than necessary. But it is definitely the start. It's definitely a turning point in the season, and not for any of the reasons that I thought it would be back when I was making those predictions about a month and a half ago.
Yeah, and Barry, there have been a lot of great coaches to coach Oklahoma, but the number is very small that have avoided a 1-3 start or worse. But Bob Stoops right now ranks among them. That might or might not be the case come Saturday.
Well, the truth of the matter is Oklahoma football's got some problems. They've got some holes. They've also lost to 2 top 10 teams.
Right.
Houston's really good. Ohio State's great. So the idea that Sooners are in free fall is really void of substance. However, TCU is not a top 10 team.
Yeah.
TCU struggled with South Dakota State, lost at home to Arkansas, took a while to put away SMU. This is not the TCU of 2 years ago, the juggernaut that finished 12-1. Mm-hmm. So you lose to these guys, and you do have legitimate holes. You do have legitimate problems that go beyond a tough schedule. Mm-hmm. So to me, this is a clarifying game. Dimitri Flowers could be right. You win this game, a lot of us will go back to believing Sooners very well could be and are the best team in the Big 12.
Right.
But if they lose this game, anything's possible, including a disastrous season.
Well, and especially coming off an off week, you've got to think these guys have had a chance to game plan, to get ready. If they come out looking unprepared, that's really going to be, I think, a note that a lot of people will be concerned about. And clearly, if they lose, then, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Kyle, let's talk real quick about Texas. And a lot of people will be watching. I think we mentioned earlier Justice Hill and his fumbles. Texas has given up some big plays. Is this a game where Justice Hill gets back on track? We saw Rennie Childs go over 100 the week before against Pitt. They seem to have some options there, but what do you feel like? It looks like Justice Hill is a guy who's got maybe something that Rennie Childs and maybe no other running back on this roster has.
Yeah, really the ability to make guys miss consistently at open space. Mike Gundy said it. His guys up front can make every single block they're supposed to, but there's always going to be maybe 1 or 2 unaccounted for defenders, and that's where you need a guy who can be good in open space, throw a juke or a stiff arm, or even run a guy over. We've seen that from Justice Hill. We haven't seen that from a lot of these other running backs. In terms of the defensive fit for Texas, I don't think we're going to see 55 rushes from the Cowboys this week. A lot of that was due to an undersized Baylor defensive line. just schematically how they were playing over James Washington after what he did the week before. To me, this seems like another game where the Cowboys sort of assume their typical identity. Use the pass to open up the run to give Justice Hill his opportunity. Texas is going to be dropping a lot of its safeties. There could be personnel changes this week, Coach Charlie Strong said down there. So it's hard to say exactly what they'll see, but they're in the same boat as the Cowboys. They got to stop big plays. And to do that, the first step is sort of keeping everything in front of you. And if they do that, and if they drop a lot of their guys, then Justice Hill should have a chance. And, Jenny, I know that you talked to some family members about that. How do you think he's going to respond from a game like he had?
Well, it's interesting. I talked with his mom, I talked with his granddad, and I talked with his high school coach. John Helsley did have a chance to talk with Marvin Dantzler, his former coach at Booker T. Washington in Tulsa earlier this year. But in talking to them, I think it's really interesting that this is a guy that has played for a lot of high-level teams over his career, even back into youth leagues. This is a guy that football was something he did even as a 3- and 4-year-old, which, nowadays you don't hear about as much because a lot of parents are really hesitant to put their kids in football that early. But he's played on a lot of teams. The idea of this criticism that Mike Gundy leveled against him, maybe didn't name names on Saturday night, but then, I think everybody recognized it was about justice. People around him said, this guy is okay with criticism. He can handle this. He's handled high expectations before. His high school coach from Booker T, Marvin Dantzler, told me that Justice started as a sophomore at Booker T, nearly started as a freshman, but started as a sophomore. Really, the only issue he had as a sophomore, a couple games where he fumbled. As a junior and senior, no fumbles. So this is a guy who's learned. As he's stepped up into different levels, he has learned how to do what he needs to do. And Barry, when you talk about true freshmen playing running back position, it's not without precedent, but there are some challenging, there's some issues, there's some positives, some negatives. Is this one of those things that he's so dynamic, you just have to accept there's going to be some learning curve with Justice Hill?
Well, I think you assume there is. Now, I would say he's past the curve.
Okay.
Time
to do it.
You fumbled twice in Waco, and it sounds like Mike Gundy says, all right, you can't do that anymore, son. And next time he does it, I think that's going to be it for a good chunk of games because they're just killers. Interceptions, when you throw 40, 50, 60 times a game, interceptions sort of become a little bit part of the game. You don't want to give up many, but you sort of understand them, a ball's tipped or whatever. But fumbles, most fumbles are due to carelessness. I mean, you got to, the ball is everything. So I think, I assume Justice Hill will go into this game completely eat up with taking care of that ball, and I would recommend it.
Yeah, probably for his job security. All right, guys, just a couple more minutes here on Football Friday. Let's do a look at our picks. Let's start with the OSU game, that early game. Kyle, who you got winning up in Stillwater?
I've got OSU winning this game. I think 38-34. It just seems like this is a Texas team that got way overrated from the start. That victory against Notre Dame does not look nearly as impressive as it did just a couple weeks ago. The way that Cal was able to score on this Texas defense, I don't see any reason why the Cowboys can't do the same. But, of course, it's going to start with them stopping that run game with Chris Warren and Deonta Freeman. And then, allowing its offense to thrive through the air and the ground. I think the Cowboys do it this week.
Brooke, who you got winning in Stillwater?
I've got Oklahoma State winning 30-25. I'm getting my fives mixed up. For essentially all the same reasons that Kyle just mentioned. I think that Texas is definitely way overrated. But I think that if Oklahoma State has the fumble issues and if there's any distractions with the Boone Gundy stuff, that could also play a factor. I don't know. I think it will be interesting to watch, and I'm glad that we have the 4 o'clock kickoff so that we can watch this.
Well, and a lot of Sooner fans will be watching because obviously the Texas game comes up next week. Barry, you're picking Texas. Why?
Like most of the weeks, I need a Big 12 upset special, and when you look at it, there's no upset in Fort Worth. It's like a 1 or 2 point spread. Nobody else is capable. So, if you're picking an upset, you'd go with Texas.
Barry, is this the 3rd week in a row you've done this to OSU?
Well, last week I picked OSU to win
because
the upset special.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been
Yes,
negative
that's
5.
right.
Okay.
Right.
Now the problem also for OSU is the road team wins every year in OSU Texas.
That's right.
2008, the last time the home team won an OSU Texas game.
crazy.
Cowboys play well in Austin. Longhorns play well in Stillwater. I hope OSU wins. I think they can. to me, the key to the game is Mason Rudolph lighting up the Longhorns. Davis Webb lit up the same kind of offense. Cal runs the same kind of offense as OSU, lit up Texas out in Berkeley. If Mason Rudolph can do that, OSU will win, but I need an upset special. I'll take Texas.
I picked OSU as well, and the only beef I have with y'all and your picks is where were all the high scores? Everybody picked that game in like the 20s and 30s. I've got this game in the 50s. Like, I thought first to 50 would win this thing. I mean, everybody can pick their own game, obviously, but I was surprised to see the other picks out there a little lower scoring.
I think turnovers will turn the tide and keep it a little lower.
Okay, there
That's my only excuse.
All right, okay. Let's turn our attention to OU TCU. That's a 4 o'clock kick down in Fort Worth. Hey, Kyle, who you got in this one?
OU 42-38. Despite all of OU's struggles, I still think the real Baker Mayfield's out there somewhere. I think we see him this week.
Brooke, how about it?
Oh, I picked against OU for the first time this season. I've got TCU winning 48-45 because I'm not convinced that OU has solved the cornerback problem. And if they can't, I think that TCU does really like those back shoulder throws that Ryan Abers has a story in tomorrow's paper all about. And if they, target that cornerback position every single time, I think there's a chance that TCU comes out with a win.
All right, Barry, we already know your upset special, so that's not your answer for why you picked OU to beat TCU.
No, I got the Sooners. I think Oklahoma's a pretty good team that's just had a killer schedule. I think TCU's overrated. Had only one offensive starter back when the season started. All OU TCU games are close.
Yeah.
Since they got in the Big 12, everything's tight. This one will be too. I'll take the Sooners.
Yeah, I'm going with the Sooners as well. I think I had them winning by a touchdown or so, but should be good. And it's a great Saturday of football. I know we focus on our local teams, but if you can sit down and watch football all day on Saturday, you are one lucky sports fan. Some great games. Again, OSU Texas at 11, OU TCU at 4 o'clock. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.